Nobody expected Ethan Cole to be anything. Not the guards at the gate who passed him every morning without a greeting. Not the other recruits who had trained beside him for 3 years. Not even the older pack members, who had watched him grow up inside the Shadow Ridge compound. A quiet boy with careful eyes and dust on his boots. He had never been loud. He had never been impressive, and in a world where strength was everything, a person who showed none of it was easy to forget. He was 20 years old on the morning of the bonding ceremony, and he told himself it did not matter if nothing happened. He was lying. The bonding ceremony was the most important event in any young pack member's life. It was the day when a wolf spirit chose its partner, a bond forged not by bloodline or rank, but by something older and harder to explain. When the bond happened, you felt it in your whole body, a warmth that began in the center of your chest and spread outward until every part of you felt alive in a new way. The wolf that appeared was yours, and you were its. 53 recruits stood in the open stone circle that morning. The sky was pale and wide above them. Elder Marin stood at the edge of the circle, her silver hair loose, her one good eye moving slowly across each young face. Alpha Daren stood beside her, arms folded, his expression unreadable. One by one, the ceremony moved forward. Each recruit stepped to the center, closed their eyes, and reached inward. And one by one, wolves appeared. A silver one that crackled with energy, a black one the size of a pony, a small, fierce red wolf that made 3 trained soldiers step back without meaning to. The crowd cheered after each one. Parents called out names. Younger children pressed forward to see. Ethan stood at the end of the line, because that was where the lowest-ranked recruits always stood. He watched each person step forward. He watched each bond happen. He kept his breathing slow and steady, and told himself again that it did not matter. When his name was called, the crowd went quiet, not out of respect. Out of something else, a held breath, a shared doubt, the unspoken thought that everyone present was already thinking. He stepped into the center of the circle. He closed his eyes. He reached inward, the way Elder Marin had taught them, down through the chest, past the heartbeat, into the quiet place where the spirit was supposed to wait. There was nothing there. He reached outward, the way some recruits did when the inward reach failed. He reached into the air around him, into the ground below him, into the sky above, still nothing. He stood in the center of that circle for 11 seconds. He would not know that number until much later, when Elder Marin told him she had counted. Those 11 seconds felt like a lifetime. He could hear the wind. He could hear someone behind him shift their weight. He could hear, very faintly, a child whispering a question to its mother. He opened his eyes. Alpha Daren had already turned away. The verdict came before the crowd had finished leaving. Ethan had until the following sundown. He was to take what he could carry and go. The pack could not support a member with no bond. That was the law, as old as Shadow Ridge itself, and Alpha Daren applied it without hesitation and without a single private word to the nephew he was sending away. Ethan went back to his small room. He sat on the edge of his bed. He did not cry. He did not throw anything. He simply sat with his hands loose in his lap and looked at the wall for a long time. Around midnight, he got up and walked into the Valewood. He did not know exactly why. He told himself he just needed air. But he had walked the edges of that forest his whole life and never gone deep, because the pack forbade it. This time, he did not stop at the edge. He kept walking. The trees grew older and taller the further in he went, their roots rising out of the ground like the hands of something buried long ago. The air turned cooler. The moonlight came through the branches in small, scattered pieces. He walked until his legs were tired, then he walked some more. He found the ruins without looking for them. They sat in a small clearing, 12 large stones arranged in a circle, each one carved with a symbol he did not recognize. The stones were not simply old the way buildings became old. They were old the way mountains were old. The kind of age that made you lower your voice without deciding to. In the center of the circle was a flat stone, wider than the others, with a single symbol cut into its surface. A crescent below a mountain, the mark of Shadow Ridge. He sat on it because there was nowhere else to go, and because his legs had decided they were done. He did not mean to sleep, but the forest was very quiet, and the stone was strangely warm, and sleep came for him before he could argue with it. He woke to a voice. Not a sound, exactly. More like the feeling of a sound, a deep, slow resonance that he felt in his chest rather than heard with his ears. It was not frightening. That was the strange part. It felt like something he had been waiting to hear for a very long time. "You stayed," the voice said. Ethan sat up. He looked around the clearing. There was no one there. "Who are you?" he asked. The answer did not come all at once. It came the way a long story comes when someone has been waiting a very long time to tell it. Carefully, in pieces, with pauses between the parts that mattered most. His name was Kairos. He had been the first Alpha, not the first Alpha of Shadow Ridge, but the first Alpha of everything. 1,000 years ago, he had united all 12 original packs, not by defeating them, but by doing something no one before him had managed. He had understood them, every pack, every fear, every old wound and unspoken need. He had walked into each territory alone, without an army, and sat down with them, and listened until they were done speaking. And then he had spoken, and what he said had changed everything. He had lived and died as all people do. But the spirit of an Alpha King did not simply disappear. It wandered. It waited. It searched for the right vessel. And for 112 years, it had found no one worth choosing. "Until tonight," Kairos said. Ethan stared at the empty clearing. The moonlight lay across the old stones in quiet silver strips. "I did not bond today," he said. "I failed the ceremony." "You did not fail," said the voice. "You were simply not meant for a small bond. The circle tonight was searching for wolves. I am not a wolf, and neither, truly, are you." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, simply, "What am I then?" The warmth that answered his question began in the center of his chest. It was not like anything he had ever felt before. It was not power, not yet. It was more like a door opening inside him. Like a room that had always been dark suddenly had light in it. By the time morning came, the bond was complete. He walked back to Shadow Ridge at dawn. The guard at the gate was a large man named Breck, who had made Ethan's life difficult on more than one occasion, in the casual way that certain people made others feel small, simply because they could. Breck looked up when Ethan approached. He studied him for a moment. Then he stepped aside without a word. He could not have explained why, he just did. Ethan asked to speak with Alpha Daren. He did not beg. He did not plead. He walked into the main hall, stood in the center of it, and waited. When his uncle entered, Ethan said, calmly, that he had returned, and that he intended to stay. Daren looked at him the way a man looks at something that should not exist. Before he could respond, Elder Marin walked into the hall. She crossed the room to where Ethan stood. She took both of his hands in hers and closed her eyes. For a long moment, she was completely still. Then her one good eye opened wide. She knelt. The hall was not empty. There were perhaps 20 people present, senior pack members, 2 soldiers, a few others who had come to see what was happening. Every one of them saw the old woman kneel. The room changed after that. Alpha Daren did not believe it easily. He was not a foolish man, but he was a proud one, and proud men often need more convincing than others. He arranged a test, 3 of his best-trained soldiers against Ethan, in the main yard, with witnesses watching. The soldiers were not cruel about it. They were professional. They moved with the efficiency of people who had done this many times before. Ethan did not fight them in the way they expected. He let the first soldier reach him, moved with the momentum rather than against it, and ended up beside the man instead of under him. The soldier tried again. Ethan was simply not where he aimed. The second time all 3 came in together. Ethan went still. He did not raise his hands. He looked at them, somehow at all 3 at once, and said one word in a language none of them had ever heard. All 3 stopped mid-stride. They stood there for several seconds, looked at each other, and none of them could explain what had just happened, or why their legs had refused to carry them forward. Later, when people asked, 2 of the 3 said it felt like remembering something very important. The third refused to discuss it at all. Sarah Ashwin had ranked first among all 53 recruits. She had earned that position through years of early mornings and late nights, and a refusal to accept second place at anything. She was brilliant and focused, and deeply unsettled by the idea that a person who had stood silent in the bonding circle was now being spoken about the way legends were spoken about. She challenged him on the 5th day after his return. It was a formal challenge, proper and witnessed, the kind the pack law recognized. She was better than him in every technical way. She was faster, stronger, and trained in methods Ethan had never been allowed to learn. She struck him hard enough, twice, that he would feel it for a week. He did not fall. After 9 minutes, with Ethan still on his feet, and Sarah breathing harder than she liked to admit, he looked at her and said, quietly enough that only she could hear, "I know what you are afraid of. You are afraid that what I carry makes everything you worked for mean less. It does not. You are exceptional. What I am does not change that at all." Sarah stared at him. She left without another word. That night, alone in her room, she sat with those words for a long time. She was not sure she believed them, but she could not stop thinking about them. Alpha Daren made his move on the 8th day. He sent careful messages to 2 neighboring pack leaders, Alpha Wren of Iron Peak and Beta Holt of Glenmarsh. His case was reasonable on the surface. A false bond claim was being used to create disorder inside Shadow Ridge, and if left unchallenged, it could affect all packs. He asked them to come and witness a proper tribunal. They arrived 3 days later. Ethan met them at the gate, alone, no escort, no soldiers behind him. He greeted Alpha Wren by name and asked about his youngest daughter, who had been ill the previous season. He spoke to Beta Holt about a loose stone on the western side of the northern bridge into Glenmarsh territory that would need attention before the rains came. Both men looked at him carefully. Neither of them had shared those details with anyone. The tribunal was set for the following morning. That night, Alpha Daren came to Ethan's room alone. He stood in the doorway and offered a settlement. A comfortable life in the Eastern Territories, resources, protection. All Ethan had to do was stand before the tribunal and say the bond was not genuine. Ethan listened to the full offer without interrupting. Then he said, "You kept me housed and fed for 17 years, while also making sure I understood I was worth less than everyone around me. I do not believe you did that because you enjoyed it. I believe you thought it was right for the pack. I understand that, and I am not angry at you, but I cannot help you avoid what is coming." Daren left without responding. He did not sleep that night. The tribunal followed a structure that had not been used in over 2 centuries. 3 tests, designed by the founders of pack law to confirm or deny a bond claim. The first test asked for the mark. A genuine bond left a physical sign on the carrier, something that appeared without being made. A permanent record of the spirit's presence. Ethan removed his outer shirt. The room went completely silent. Along his spine, from the base of his neck all the way down, 12 symbols were etched in silver that shifted when you tried to look at them directly. One for each of the original packs, in the exact arrangement that existed only in sealed historical records. The second test asked for the command. An Alpha King's bond gave its carrier a voice that reached something old and instinctive in every bonded wolf present. Not a trick. Something that worked the way gravity worked, without asking permission and without needing to be believed in first. Ethan stood before 60 experienced wolves from 3 different packs and spoke one word. Every person in the room went to one knee. The 2 visiting alphas managed to rise after 3 seconds. Their soldiers took longer. Several people at the back of the room stayed down for nearly a full minute without noticing. The third test asked for knowledge that only the original spirit could carry. The tribunal asked where Kairos had been laid to rest. Ethan described a hillside in the northern range, the exact slope, the 3 trees that grew above the burial stones, the small stream that ran 20 feet to the east. He named the symbol carved into the largest stone and recited the words written beneath it in the old language. Elder Marin opened a sealed archive record that had not been touched in 900 years. She read it aloud. Then she set it down and looked at the tribunal without speaking, because everything that needed to be said was already in the air. Alpha Wren formally acknowledged the bond first, a quiet, clearly spoken statement, with his eyes on Ethan the whole time. Beta Holt followed a moment after. Alpha Daren stood alone on his side of the hall. Ethan walked toward him. He stopped a short distance away and looked at his uncle, at the lines in his face, the stiffness in his shoulders, the particular kind of pride that had kept this man standing through things that might have broken someone softer. "You can fight this," Ethan said quietly, "or you can be part of what comes next. I would rather you chose the second." The hall held its breath. Daren's kneel was slow. It cost him something visible, something real. His jaw was tight. His eyes stayed straight ahead. His hands, when they touched the floor, were not quite steady. But he knelt. By the end of the week, messengers had arrived from 6 other packs. More were on the way. Ethan sat on the compound wall the night after the tribunal, in the exact spot where he had sat the night before the bonding ceremony. The stones were the same. The sky was the same. Below him, the compound was louder than it had been in years. Voices carrying across the yard. Fires lit late into the night. The particular energy of a community that had witnessed something it would spend a very long time talking about. Sarah climbed up and sat beside him without asking. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that exists between two people who are thinking the same question, but are not quite ready to say it. Finally, she said, "You knew, didn't you? That night in the forest, something chose you." Ethan considered this. He looked out toward the dark tree line where the Valewood began. "Something found me," he said. "I am not sure that is the same thing." Sarah nodded slowly. She looked at the same tree line. "What happens now?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "I do not know yet," he said. "But Kairos told me something before I left the forest. He said the 12 packs were united once because one person was willing to sit down with each of them and truly listen before speaking. He said the world needed that again. And you think that person is you?" He looked at her. There was no pride in his expression. No performance. Just a quiet steadiness that she had not seen in anyone before. Not in the alphas she had studied. Not in the warriors she had trained beside. "I think it has to be someone," he said. "And it turned out to be me." She almost smiled. It was the closest thing to warmth she had shown him since the day they first met. They sat there for a while longer, on the wall of the place that had once tried to send him away, looking out at a world that had finally run out of reasons to ignore him. Inside him, very quietly, Kairos said nothing at all. He did not need to.